10 Legendary Outlaws of the Wild West. Number 10. Hoodoo Brown. The first Wild West legend on this list was actually a lawman, but that didn't stop him breaking it. In fact, it helped him in doing so. Real name Hyman G. Neal, Hoodoo Brown was born in Missouri, but soon found himself in the small town of Las Vegas, though the one in New Mexico, not the one you're thinking of. Las Vegas had a bit of an image problem at the time as a town of lawlessness, but Brown saw an opportunity within that chaos. He was elected as Justice of the Peace for East Las Vegas in 1879 and hired his own police force. They were known as the Dodge City Gang and were nasty pieces of work, engaging in robberies of stagecoaches and trains as well as murder along the way. They were also in a position to determine their own crimes were in self-defense, that is, if the lengths they'd taken to cover their own tracks weren't sufficient. After a year of corruption and disorder, Las Vegas had enough. In 1880, they formed a band of vigilantes and forced Hoodoo Brown from the town, who was forced to escape to Mexico. Number 9. Doc Holliday. Real name John Henry Holliday, the Doc part of his name may have come from the fact he was, like all bad boys are, initially a dentist. He did his dental duty in Dallas, Texas, but by night his tastes were far more wild. Doc was a gambler and became notorious for his ability to play card games like poker. He also suffered from tuberculosis and was regularly armed with a knife or a gun. He began to drift around various states in the West, abandoning teeth and instead fighting tooth and nail, whether at the poker table or away from it. There were even legends of him knifing open the stomach of an opponent who seemed to be cheating, though contemporary historians do question the validity of that story. What isn't in question though is Holliday's feared reputation across the states. After a life of blood and cards, he succumbed to his TB in 1887, aged just 36. His death made the Denver Republican newspaper, who said he had the reputation of a desperado and bad man generally, yet he was a very mild-mannered man, was genial and companionable, and had many excellent qualities. Number 8. Black Bart. Over the course of his 8-year criminal career in mid-19th century California and Oregon, Black Bart held up many stagecoaches but did so in a surprisingly gentlemanly fashion. He never took from the passengers, just the strongbox, he never fired his gun despite being armed, he even left cards containing short poems at his crime scenes. This contains more clues to his true identity than one might think. You see, Black Bart was actually a man named Charles Bowles. Originally from Norfolk in the UK, Bowles was a well-to-do gentleman, a member of the upper classes of society. In fact, he was only caught because of a handkerchief he left at the crime scene by accident while fleeing wounded. He took his name from a serial that featured in newspapers featuring a bandit named Black Bart. He spent 4 years in prison for his crimes and was so much of a legend he even inspired copycats, who also left short verses or poems at the scenes of their crimes. He disappeared in 1888, a month after being let out of jail aged 59. Number 7. Jessie James. One of the most well-known names when it comes to outlaws, Jessie James's story is a wild one, even if it has been a bit embellished over the years. Previously a soldier during the American Civil War and a farm boy before that, James turned to a life of crime and banditry, numb to bloodshed and violence. An outlaw at 22, within a 12-year period, he took part in up to 19 robberies of trains, banks and coaches, leaving bloodshed in his wake, shooting an innocent cashier on at least one occasion. Jessie James's legacy is a mythic one. Some have lauded him as the American Robin Hood, though there is no evidence he actually gave his riches to the poor. There was even a rumour he jumped the 18-foot-wide Devil's Gulch ravine on horseback, which is agreed by historians to have been impossible. James was even doggedly pursued by the Pinkerton Detective Agency, but was never caught by them. James, however, was eventually assassinated by a member of his own gang, Robert Ford, in 1882. Number 6. John Wesley Hardin. When we talk about the mean men of the Wild West, you shouldn't miss the man who claimed to have killed 42 others in his gunslinging days. Hardin first committed murder at the age of 15 when he killed a black man after a disagreement. By the time he was 21, he was said to have killed 27, according to Lee Florin's book on him. He led a life of dueling and gambling in and out of prison, constantly attempting to escape. He was involved in many shootouts in his time, which goes to show how fearsome he was. There was even a story he shot a man for snoring, and though he denies that, it speaks to his legend. Hardin studied law in jail and was admitted to the bar, but this life of law didn't last long. While a lawyer, he was having an affair with the wife of a client, whose life he put a bounty on. One of these assassins later killed Hardin in a saloon for not paying him for the hit. Number 5. Wild Bill Hickok. A nickname like that is one that has to be earned, but James Butler Hickok earned it and then some. Wild Bill is primarily remembered now as a lawman and somebody who brought order to the Wild West, but that didn't stop him acting outside the law, especially utilising his fearsome reputation as an excellent gunslinger. In fact, Wild Bill features in one of the only known examples of a classic Wild West standoff. In 1865, in the town of Springfield, he and a local gambler named Davis Tutt had bitter disagreements over women and watches, which resulted in the first quick-draw duel in the West. Wild Bill obviously won. This was covered in a magazine at the time and spread his legend across the states, where he would continue to slay with his gun for years. He then settled down as a sheriff, marshal, and even an actor at one point. Then, in 1876, he was shot by another young gunslinger while playing cards. He died holding a pair of black aces and a pair of black eights, which is now known as the Dead Man's Hand. Number 4. Billy the Kid. Unlike others on this list, Henry McCarty never robbed a bank, nor a train or stagecoach. Instead, his vice was stealing horses. He even started by just stealing clothes, which arguably sounds like a less bloody pursuit. But make no mistake, the Kid, who legend dictates killed 21 men by the time of his death at age 21, was an easygoing man but had a capacity for violence. While the actual number of men we know he was involved in slaughtering is in fact closer to 9, Billy had quite the reputation in the late 1870s. His legend spread further in 1880 when he successfully escaped the Lincoln County Courthouse, leaving a bloody trail behind him. The newspapers widely reported this massive story, and he soon became one of the West's most wanted men. After this, the Kid lived out on the frontier before taking refuge in Fort Sumner, New Mexico. Pat Garrett, New Mexico sheriff, was the man who shot Billy on July 14, 1881. The Kid's life was short, after all he died aged 21, but his legend has lived on for decades since, with over 50 movies made about the young rogue. Number 3. Belle Star. The fact that Myra Maybelle Shirley Star eventually became to be known colloquially as the Bandit Queen tells you all you need to know. Star, then known as Myra Shirley, grew up in Missouri in the late 1860s, but when she was older the family moved to Dallas. Her brother was involved with gangs before he died, so outlaws often hid out at her family home. Therefore, Shirley was surrounded by criminals for a lot of her life. After 2 previous marriages, she met and married Cherokee Sam Starr in 1880, who had connections with outlaws like Jessie James. They lived on a ranch named Younger's Bend, which was treated as another place for bandits to hide out from the law. Her reputation grew as a gang leader who was a criminal mastermind who often took part in robberies alongside her criminal husbands, stealing horses and money all across Dallas. Starr's eventual death was shrouded in mystery as she was ambushed alone and shot in the back of her head, some say with her own gun. The Bandit Queen's killer has since never been discovered. Number 2. Kingfisher. In 1870s Texas, a particular road bore a sign that caused some to about turn on their horses pretty quickly. That sign read, "This is Kingfisher's road, take the other." Born John Kingfisher, he lived in the middle of Dimmitt County, in a lawless land where cattle rustling was rife. He had a ranch right in its centre that hosted many drifters and outlaws. In fact, he'd moved there himself after various run-ins with the law, including being imprisoned for breaking into homes. He was an imposing man in the region, often seen with his revolvers encased in ivory, wearing a black jacket with gold trim. He and his fellow outlaws would engage in horse and cattle rustling, and was arrested for such crimes, as well as murder. He avoided jail this time, but interestingly gave up a life of crime after this incident. He became a deputy sheriff with hopes of being elected to the sheriff of Uvalde County in 1884, but he was killed at a shootout in a vaudeville variety theatre before he got the chance. Number 1. Butch Cassidy. In 1866 Utah, a boy named Robert Leroy Parker met Mike Cassidy at the ranch where he worked. He didn't know it, but this was the start of his transformation into the mythic figure Butch Cassidy. Mike Cassidy acted as a mentor figure, teaching him how to shoot a gun. At age 18, Parker departed for Colorado, where he would later perform his first bank robbery, taking $20,000. It was then he changed his last name to Cassidy. Butch came from the fact he used to work as a butcher. Later, in Wyoming, Cassidy started his own outlaw gang called the Wild Bunch. Their number included Harry Longabaugh, also known as the Sundance Kid. In the late 1890s, the Wild Bunch robbed many places in the Southwest, including nabbing $70,000 from a train in New Mexico. Despite this though, apparently Cassidy was known to his neighbours as a kind man who was willing to help them out, and not particularly violent. Pinkerton detectives were on his tail though, so in the early 1900s, he fled to Bolivia with the Sundance Kid. Legend has it they were killed in a shootout there, but since there was no conclusive evidence of this, nobody knows what became of Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. So those were 10 legendary outlaws of the Wild West. Have we missed any out? Let me know in the comments down below. Be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to All Time 10s if you haven't done so already for more great videos like the one on screen right now.